1. Know your worth. Stop discounting yourself like a clearance sale. People often look for validation in others. But let me remind you, the price tag of a diamond doesn't change if someone doesn't recognize its value. Confidence begins the day you stop begging for approval and start recognizing your own worth. Wake up each day and remind yourself, I am valuable, with or without applause. Knowing your worth is like discovering a hidden treasure within yourself that you never truly valued. It's not about arrogance or thinking you are better than others. It's about finally realizing that you are enough just as you are. Too often, we spend our lives waiting for the world to validate us, to clap for us, to tell us we are special. But here's the truth. Your worth was never meant to be determined by others. It is something that exists because you exist. You are valuable not because of what you do or what you own, but because of who you are at your core. Think about it this way. A diamond lying in the dirt does not lose its value just because no one has noticed it. The day someone picks it up, cleans it, and places it in a ring, people suddenly call it precious. But was it not precious even before? In the same way, your value does not change just because people fail to recognize it. Sometimes life, society, or even our own experiences can cover that inner shine with layers of self-doubt and fear. But underneath it all, you remain valuable, unshakably valuable. Many of us have been conditioned since childhood to tie our worth to achievements. We think, if I get good grades, I'll be loved. If I get that job, I'll be respected. If I make a lot of money, people will finally see my value. And when those external factors don't show up, we shrink, believing we are less. But imagine this, if a child doesn't score well in an exam, do we stop loving that child? No, because their worth is beyond a piece of paper. The same applies to you. Your worth is not negotiable, it's permanent. Look around in your daily life. Think of someone you admire deeply. Maybe it's a teacher, a parent, a friend, or a mentor. Do you admire them for their possessions or their status? Probably not. You admire their kindness, their resilience, their sense of humor, the way they make you feel safe or inspired. That's because worth is about essence, not appearance. And if you can recognize that in others, why is it so hard to see it in yourself? Start practicing this in small ways. When you wake up in the morning, instead of immediately picking up your phone and scrolling through social media to compare yourself to others, pause and remind yourself, I am valuable, even before I accomplish anything today. That simple reminder begins to rewire the mind. Over time, you start to detach your self-esteem from the noise of the world. Here's a small story. There was once a man holding an auction. He held up an old, dusty violin. No one wanted it. It looked worn out and unworthy of attention. The auctioneer struggled to get even one bid. Then a musician walked up, picked up the violin, and played a melody so beautiful that it brought tears to the eyes of the people listening. Suddenly, the bids skyrocketed. What changed? Not the violin. It was always capable of creating that music. The only difference was someone finally saw its worth and revealed its potential. You too are like that violin. Maybe life has made you feel unwanted, undervalued, or not enough, but your potential and your worth are waiting to be seen, most importantly by you. When you truly know your worth, something magical happens. You stop settling. You stop settling for relationships where you are treated as an option. You stop settling for jobs that drain your soul. You stop settling for friendships that only take but never give. Knowing your worth gives you the courage to walk away from what doesn't honor you and the strength to pursue what truly aligns with your values and your dreams. Another beautiful shift that happens is that you stop competing with others. When you know your value, you don't feel the need to compare your journey with anyone else's. You realize that no one can replace you because no one can be you. Think of a flower. A rose never looks at a sunflower and says, "Why don't I look like that?" It just blooms in its own time, in its own way. Your journey is the same. The moment you embrace that, confidence naturally follows. Life will test you. There will be times when people criticize you, doubt you, or even abandon you. But knowing your worth keeps you steady in those storms. It reminds you that external noise does not define internal truth. Just like a ship doesn't sink because of the water around it, but because of the water that enters it. You won't sink if you don't let those negative voices enter your heart. Start treating yourself the way you would treat someone you love deeply. Speak kindly to yourself. Invest in your growth. Take care of your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. These small daily acts build a foundation of self-respect that no one can shake. And when you walk into a room with that quiet confidence, not arrogance, but self-assurance, people feel it. You won't need to demand respect. Your presence will command it. Silencing the inner critic is like turning off a radio that's been playing negative static in your head for years. That voice, oh, we all know it well, whispers things like, "You're not good enough," "You always mess things up," or "Who do you think you are to dream that big?" It speaks so often and so loudly that we start believing it, as if that voice is telling the absolute truth. But here's the reality: that inner critic is nothing more than a collection of fears, old experiences, and external opinions we've internalized over the years. And the good news is we have the power to change its script. Think about this: if someone outside of you said the things you say to yourself, would you tolerate it? Imagine a colleague telling you every day, "You'll never succeed," or a friend saying, "You look terrible." Why even try? You'd either cut ties with that person or confront them. Yet, when it's our own voice, we quietly accept the abuse. Why? Because somewhere along the way, we confuse that voice with truth. But the inner critic is not truth, it's just noise. And like any noise, it can be quieted. One of the biggest traps of the inner critic is that it magnifies failures and minimizes successes. You might accomplish 10 good things in a day, but if you make one mistake, that voice will latch onto it and replay it on a loop, making you feel inadequate. For example, imagine you gave a great presentation at work. Everyone praised you, but one person pointed out a minor error. Guess what the inner critic will highlight? Not the applause, but that one mistake, whispering, "See, you always mess up." Learning to silence that voice means shifting the focus, choosing to see the 10 successes instead of obsessing over the single slip up. Silencing the inner critic is not about pretending challenges don't exist. It's about changing how you respond to them. Life will always have obstacles, but how you speak to yourself during those times determines whether you rise or crumble. Take the example of a child learning to ride a bicycle. When they fall, they don't say, "I'm a failure, I'll never get this." Instead, they try again because no one has taught them to doubt themselves yet. Over time, as they hear negative voices, maybe from parents, teachers, or peers, they start believing that making mistakes equals being unworthy. But what if we relearn the child's way of thinking? What if every time we stumbled, we said, "Okay, that didn't work, but I'll try again"? That's how you quiet the critic and nurture the encourager within. Another way to look at this is to imagine you're speaking to your best friend. If your friend came to you after a failure and said, "I'm useless," would you agree with them? No. You'd remind them of their strengths, encourage them, and help them see the bigger picture. Why then are we so unwilling to offer that same kindness to ourselves? One of the most powerful shifts you can make is learning to talk to yourself the way you talk to someone you love, with compassion, patience, and understanding. Daily life is full of moments where the inner critic tries to creep in. Maybe you post a picture on social media and it doesn't get as many likes as you hoped. Instantly, that voice says, "No one cares, you're not interesting." Or maybe you see someone else achieving something you've been dreaming about, and that voice hisses, "See, you'll never be as good as them." These are the moments to pause, breathe, and remind yourself that your value is not measured by likes, comparisons, or temporary results. The inner critic thrives on comparison, so one of the best ways to silence it is to stay focused on your own journey. Flowers don't compete with each other, they simply bloom. There's also something deeply liberating about challenging the critic with evidence. For instance, if that voice tells you, "You never do anything right," stop and list 5 things you did well today, even if they're small. Did you show up to work despite being tired? That counts. Did you help someone with a kind word? That matters. By confronting the lies with truth, you begin retraining your brain to see your strengths instead of your shortcomings. Silencing the inner critic doesn't mean you'll never hear that voice again. It means you won't let it control your decisions or your self-worth. Picture it like driving a car. The inner critic may always be in the back seat, mumbling its doubts, but you don't have to let it take the wheel. You are in charge of where you're going, and you can choose to turn up the volume on the voice of encouragement instead. One of the most powerful things that happens when you learn to quiet that inner noise is that you start living with more courage. You try new things because you're no longer paralyzed by the fear of judgment or failure. You start showing up fully, whether it's in your relationships, your career, or your dreams, because you finally believe you are enough as you are. And when you operate from that belief, you unlock a kind of confidence that doesn't rely on external validation. It comes from within, and no one can take it away from you. Life is too short to spend it at war with yourself. You are the one person you will be with every single day of your life. Shouldn't you be your own ally instead of your harshest critic? Start practicing self-kindness today. The next time that voice tries to tear you down, pause and ask, "Would I say this to someone I love?" If the answer is no, change the script. Replace "I'm such a failure" with I'm learning and growing. Replace I'm not good enough with I'm worthy and capable. With time, patience, and practice, that once loud critic will start to fade into the background. It won't have the power it once did. And in that quiet space, you'll hear a new voice emerging, a voice that says, "You are strong. You are enough. And you are capable of so much more than you ever imagined." Celebrating small wins is one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to build unshakable confidence. The problem is, most of us overlook those tiny victories because we're too focused on the big picture, the big promotion, the dream house, the perfect relationship, or the big aha moment that will make us feel like we've arrived. But life isn't built on grand victories alone. It's built on countless small steps, taken consistently, that slowly shape who we become. When you learn to notice and appreciate those steps, your perspective on yourself and on life begins to transform. Think about how a child learns to walk. No one expects them to stand up and run on their very first attempt. The first time they wobble and take 2 steps before falling, the whole family cheers as if they just won an Olympic medal. Why? Because we instinctively understand that progress, no matter how small, is worth celebrating. Somewhere along the way, as we grow older, we forget that. We stop cheering for ourselves and start criticizing every stumble. That's why so many of us feel stuck. We're moving forward, but refusing to acknowledge it. Celebrating small wins is not about pretending that little things are big things. It's about recognizing that big things are made up of many little things. Imagine trying to build a wall. You don't stack all the bricks at once. You place one brick carefully at a time, and over days or weeks, you see the wall standing tall. In the same way, every small action you take toward your goals, waking up earlier, sending that email you've been procrastinating, reading a few pages of a self-development book, practicing a new skill, is a brick. And when you honor that brick, you motivate yourself to lay the next one. Let's take a real life example. Suppose you've always struggled with your health and you decide to start exercising. On your first day, you walk for just 10 minutes. The critic in you might say, "That's nothing. Real fitness requires an hour at the gym." But if you choose to celebrate those 10 minutes, I showed up, I took the first step, you create a sense of achievement that pushes you to do it again tomorrow, maybe for 15 minutes. Fast forward 6 months, and you've built a healthy routine without even realizing how much progress you've made. All because you choose to acknowledge the small steps. This practice also helps combat the dangerous habit of comparison. In the age of social media, we are constantly bombarded with images of people's highlight reels. Someone buying their dream car, another landing a 6-figure job, someone else traveling to exotic destinations. It's easy to feel like you're falling behind. But when you start celebrating your own small wins, you shift the focus inward. You stop asking, "How far ahead is everyone else?" and start asking, "How much progress have I made since yesterday?" That shift is liberating. Even in relationships, celebrating small wins makes a huge difference. Think about a couple learning to rebuild trust after a rough patch. Instead of expecting everything to magically fix itself overnight, they start noticing the little changes, the honest conversations, the small acts of kindness. the moments of patience. By appreciating those small wins, they create momentum toward healing. The same principle applies to friendships, careers, and personal growth. Small steps build strong foundations. Another beautiful aspect of celebrating small wins is how it changes your relationship with failure. When you only celebrate big victories, a setback feels like a catastrophe. But when you've trained yourself to notice and appreciate every little effort, even in the midst of failure, you see the progress you've made. Let's say you're learning a new language and you fumble through a conversation with a native speaker. Instead of thinking, "I'm terrible at this," you might celebrate the fact that you had the courage to try, or that you recognized a few words you didn't know last month. That perspective keeps you moving forward instead of giving up. Small wins also nurture gratitude. When you pause to appreciate that you completed a tough task, that you drank more water today, that you stayed calm during a stressful meeting, or that you chose kindness over anger, you train your mind to see the good in your daily life. Gratitude and confidence are deeply connected. When you focus on what you're doing right, you naturally feel better about yourself. The most inspiring part of celebrating small wins is how it builds momentum. Confidence isn't something you wake up with one morning. It's something you build through repeated evidence that you are capable. Every small win is like a vote for the person you are becoming. Each time you acknowledge a victory, no matter how tiny, you're telling yourself, "See, I can do this. I'm growing. I'm moving forward." Over time, that belief solidifies into an unshakable confidence that no one can take away from you. Consider someone trying to write a book. The task feels overwhelming at first. If they wait until the book is published to feel proud, they'll be stuck in a cycle of frustration for months, maybe years. But if they choose to celebrate every page written, every chapter completed, every day they sit down to write, even when they don't feel like it, they stay motivated, and eventually, those small wins add up to a finished manuscript. Life is full of opportunities to celebrate, but we often overlook them because we think they're too ordinary. Waking up on time, keeping a promise to yourself, finishing your chores, making it through a tough day without breaking down, these moments matter. They show resilience, discipline, and progress. And when you start to honor those moments, you develop a quiet sense of pride in who you are and who you're becoming. So make it a practice at the end of each day. Pause and ask yourself, what small win can I celebrate today? Write it down if you can. Over time, you'll look back and see a trail of progress that proves just how far you've come. And that's the magic of celebrating small wins. It turns the ordinary into extraordinary and teaches you that success is not one big leap, but a series of steady, determined steps. Surrounding yourself with believers is like planting a seed in fertile soil. No matter how small that seed is, when the soil is rich, it will grow. In life, we are all like that seed, full of potential, full of possibilities, but our environment determines how well we bloom. You may have the talent, the ambition, and the drive, but if you are constantly surrounded by negativity, criticism, and doubt, it becomes harder to grow into the best version of yourself. On the other hand, when you place yourself in the company of those who see your worth, encourage your growth, and cheer for your success, You begin to flourish in ways you never thought possible. Every single one of us has encountered people who drain our confidence. They may not even mean to hurt us, but their words sting and linger. It could be that relative who constantly reminds you of your failures, that colleague who always belittles your ideas, or even a friend who subtly mocks your dreams. Over time, their voices become so loud that you start believing them, questioning your potential and doubting your path. But here's the truth: your surroundings don't just influence you, they shape you. And if you want unshakable confidence, you need to be intentional about who you let into your circle. Think about an athlete preparing for a big race. They don't train with people who tell them, "You're too slow, you'll never make it." They train with people who push them, who remind them of their strengths, and who hold them accountable to their potential. Why? Because they understand that success isn't just about their personal effort, it's also about the environment that nurtures that effort. Life is the same way. There's a story of a bamboo tree that perfectly illustrates this idea. For years after it's planted, the bamboo shows no visible growth above the soil. People may look at that patch of dirt and think nothing's happening, but what's really happening is underground. Its roots are growing deep and strong, preparing to support rapid growth later. Then, almost suddenly, in just a few weeks, the bamboo shoots up to incredible heights. Surrounding yourself with believers works the same way. They help you lay those deep roots of confidence, resilience, and courage so that when your moment to rise comes, you can stand tall without fear of toppling over. Look around your daily life and notice the people who light you up. It might be that friend who always reminds you of your progress when you're feeling stuck, or the mentor who sees potential in you that you can't yet see in yourself, or even the coworker who says, "I believe in you, go for it." When you share a new idea, these people are your believers. They are the ones who, even in your quietest seasons, remind you of your song. They don't compete with you, they celebrate you. And their belief has a powerful way of awakening your own. But surrounding yourself with believers isn't just about finding supportive people, it's also about creating boundaries with those who tear you down. It doesn't mean you cut everyone off or live in isolation, but it does mean protecting your energy and your dreams. Not everyone is meant to have a front row seat in your life. Some people can only see you through the lens of their own limitations. And if you let their doubt in, it will shrink your confidence and dim your light. Protecting your space is an act of self-respect, and it gives you room to grow without the constant weight of unnecessary negativity. Think about a time when you achieved something you were proud of: a promotion, a personal milestone, a creative project. Now think about the people who celebrated with you, the ones who said, "I knew you could do it." How did their belief make you feel? It didn't just make you happy. It made you more confident to take the next step. That's the power of a supportive circle. They don't just celebrate where you are, they also push you toward where you can be. Even in everyday situations, you can see the difference between believers and doubters. Imagine you're learning to drive. One instructor keeps scolding you for every mistake, and you start gripping the steering wheel in fear. Second, guessing yourself at every turn. Another instructor calmly says, "You're improving. Let's try that turn again. You'll get it this time." Which one helps you learn better? The second one. That's exactly how believers work. They create a safe space where your confidence can grow even when you stumble. Being surrounded by believers also reminds you that confidence is contagious. When you see others chasing their dreams with courage, you feel inspired to do the same. Their faith in themselves strengthens your faith in yourself. It's like standing near a warm fire on a cold night. Even if you didn't build the fire, you feel its warmth. And here's the most beautiful part. As you surround yourself with believers, you start becoming a believer for others too. When you lift someone else up, when you remind a friend of their worth, or encourage a colleague to keep going, you don't just build their confidence, you reinforce your own. Because in cheering for someone else's potential, you're reminding yourself that growth is always possible for everyone, including you. Life will always have its share of challenges, and there will always be people who doubt you, criticize you, or fail to understand your vision. But when you have that circle of believers, those people who say, "Keep going, I see something in you," you begin to realize that you don't have to face those challenges alone. Their belief becomes an anchor when life's waves try to knock you down. So, take a moment to reflect. Who in your life lifts you up? Who makes you feel seen, valued, and capable? Spend more time with those people. And just as importantly, ask yourself, who do you need to become a believer for? Because when we build each other up, we create a chain of confidence so strong that it changes not just individuals, but entire communities. Embracing failure as feedback is one of the most liberating shifts you can make in life. So many people see failure as a dead end, as a final judgment on their ability or worth. They think, "I failed, so maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not meant for this." But failure is not the opposite of success. It is a part of success. In fact, every story of achievement you've ever admired is built on a foundation of failures that taught powerful lessons. When you start viewing failure as feedback instead of defeat, you transform it from something that breaks you into something that builds you. Think about a baby learning to walk. That little one stumbles, falls, bumps their head, and sometimes even cries. But what do they do next? They get up and try again. Not once do they think, "Walking isn't for me. Maybe I'm just meant to crawl for the rest of my life." That thought never crosses their mind because they haven't been conditioned to fear failure. Instead, they treat every fall as part of the process. And eventually, those tiny steps turn into confident strides. That's how life works for all of us if we allow ourselves to keep getting back up. The problem is, as we grow older, we start attaching shame and judgment to failure. If we don't get the job we applied for, we think we're not talented enough. If our first business idea doesn't work, we label ourselves as bad entrepreneurs. If a relationship ends, we assume we're unlovable. But here's the truth: failure doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do with the failure. Do you sit in the rubble of disappointment? Or do you pick up the lessons and rebuild something stronger? Take Thomas Edison as an example. When he was working on the electric light bulb, he failed over 1,000 times. Reporters asked him how it felt to fail that many times, And he famously said, "I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps." What a powerful way to look at it! Every so-called failure was simply a piece of feedback guiding him closer to the solution. Without those failures, there would be no light bulb lighting up our lives today. In your daily life, you can start adopting the same mindset. Let's say you're learning a new skill, perhaps cooking. The first time you try, the dish burns. The second time, it's undercooked. The inner critic might scream, "You're terrible at this. Just quit." But if you choose to see those attempts as feedback, you start asking, "What went wrong? What can I adjust next time?" And with each try, you get better until one day, you're confidently cooking meals you never thought you could. That's not magic. That's the power of feedback in action. Failure also teaches humility and resilience, two qualities that build deep, unshakable confidence. Humility, because it reminds you that you don't know everything and that there's always room to grow. Resilience, because every time you rise after falling, you teach yourself that setbacks aren't the end of your story, they're just chapters in it. That kind of strength doesn't come from smooth, easy victories. It comes from weathering storms and learning to steer your ship even when the waves are high. Consider athletes for a moment. Behind every gold medal is a string of losses, missed shots, and bad games. They don't get to the podium because they never failed. They get there because they refuse to let failure stop them. Instead, they study their mistakes, adjust their strategies, and keep showing up day after day until success becomes inevitable. Your life is no different. Even in relationships, failure offers valuable feedback. Maybe a friendship ended because of poor communication. Maybe a relationship fell apart because of mismatched priorities. Instead of labeling yourself as bad at relationships, you can choose to see the experience as a lesson. You now understand what kind of communication you need, what kind of values matter to you, and what you will and won't compromise on in the future. That feedback, painful as it might be in the moment, prepares you for healthier, stronger connections down the road. The beauty of embracing failure as feedback is that it removes fear. When you're no longer terrified of failing, you start to take bold actions. You launch that idea, apply for that opportunity, speak up in that meeting, or express how you really feel. And even if it doesn't work out the way you hoped, you walk away with insights that make you better, wiser, and more prepared for the next step. There's also something deeply empowering about owning your failures instead of hiding from them. When you can look at a setback and say, "Yes, I fell, but here's what I learned," you take control of the narrative. Failure no longer becomes a mark of shame, it becomes a badge of growth. People respect that kind of courage, not because you're perfect, but because you're real, and you keep moving forward despite the challenges. And here's the secret many people don't realize. The people who succeed the most aren't the ones who fail the least. They're the ones who are willing to fail the most, because each attempt teaches them something new. Every entrepreneur, artist, athlete, or leader you admire has a backstory filled with failed attempts, closed doors, and hard lessons. What sets them apart is that they didn't let those experiences break them. They treated failure as a teacher, not a verdict. So, The next time you face a setback, big or small, pause and shift your perspective. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" That one question turns failure into feedback, pain into purpose, and disappointment into direction. Serving and adding value to others is one of the most profound ways to build confidence that lasts a lifetime. There's something extraordinary that happens when you shift your focus from "what can I get" to "what can I give?" You stop obsessing over your insecurities and start discovering the incredible power you carry to make a difference. Confidence that is rooted in service is unshakable because it's no longer about external validation. It's about knowing that your existence is meaningful, that your presence adds light to the lives of others. Think about a time when you helped someone without expecting anything in return. Maybe you guided a lost stranger, encouraged a friend going through a tough time, or taught someone a skill they were struggling with. Remember how you felt afterward. There's a quiet sense of pride that blooms inside you, not the loud pride of ego, but the gentle pride of purpose. That feeling is your inner self reminding you, "I matter. What I do matters." When you serve others, you don't just change their world, you transform your own. Life is filled with small opportunities to add value, but we often overlook them because we think making a difference has to be something grand or dramatic. The truth is, even the simplest acts of kindness can ripple out in ways you may never fully realize. Holding the door for someone, offering a smile to a stranger, or listening, really listening, to someone who needs to talk can change the course of their day and sometimes even their life. And every time you step into that role, your sense of confidence grows because you begin to see yourself as a person of worth, a person who brings good to the world. There's a story about a man walking along a beach covered in starfish that had washed ashore. Thousands of them were lying there, drying out under the sun. A young boy was gently picking them up and throwing them back into the water, one by one. The man laughed and said, "Why are you bothering? There are so many starfish. You'll never make a difference." The boy picked up another starfish, tossed it into the water, and said, "I made a difference to that one." That's the essence of adding value. You may not change the entire world, but you can change someone's world. In daily life, serving others can also shift how you see yourself. When you feel stuck, anxious, or doubtful about your abilities, helping someone else creates a sense of clarity and purpose. Imagine a student struggling with self-confidence. One day, they volunteer to tutor a classmate in a subject they understand well. As they see the classmate improving because of their guidance, something inside them changes. They begin to realize their own abilities and strengths. That single act of giving becomes a mirror, reflecting their value back to them. Adding value doesn't always mean doing big things. It often starts with being present. In our busy lives, we underestimate how powerful it is to simply show up for someone. A friend dealing with heartbreak doesn't need you to fix everything. They just need you to sit beside them, to listen, to remind them they're not alone. That presence adds more value than any solution could. And as you do that, your confidence in your ability to impact others grows. Serving others also teaches you a critical truth. You already have enough to give. Many people hold back because they think, I'm not successful enough, or I don't have much to offer. But service isn't about having everything. It's about giving from what you have right now. Your time, your smile, your attention, your encouragement. These are gifts that cost you nothing, but can mean everything to someone else. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more you give, the more you receive. Not necessarily in material ways, but in fulfillment, joy, and a deep sense of belonging. Helping others connects you to humanity in a way nothing else can. It reminds you that you're part of something bigger, and that realization builds a confidence that no criticism or failure can shake. In the workplace, this principle is just as powerful. Imagine two colleagues, one who focuses only on climbing the ladder, and another who focuses on supporting their team, sharing knowledge, and celebrating other successes. Over time, who do you think earns the most respect and trust? The one who adds value. Confidence built on service doesn't need constant validation because it's grounded in purpose. Even in personal relationships, serving and adding value creates bonds that are deep and lasting. Think about a partner or friend who always makes you feel supported. Not because they're perfect, but because they show up for you in big and small ways. That kind of presence builds trust and in turn builds your confidence in the relationship. One of the most inspiring aspects of serving others is that it makes you less afraid of failure. When you focus on adding value, your goal is no longer to look perfect, it's to make a difference. A teacher who cares deeply about their students will try new methods, even if some don't work, because the goal isn't their ego, it's their students' success. Likewise, when your purpose shifts from proving yourself to serving others, you stop fearing mistakes and start embracing opportunities to grow. There is a quiet strength in people who live this way. They don't need to boast about their achievements or constantly seek attention because their confidence isn't built on fragile things like approval or praise. It's built on the unshakable truth that their life matters and their actions have meaning. That kind of confidence radiates. People are drawn to it, not because it's loud or flashy, but because it's authentic and grounded. Ultimately, serving and adding value to others reminds you that confidence is not about standing above others. It's about standing with them. It's about realizing that your greatest strength isn't in how much you can take, but in how much you can give. And the beautiful irony is that in lifting others, you lift yourself.